3 of Vamped Away by Xtrole. Note, this is just a casual recording of this story, and there may be reading errors that happen, as was the case with parts 1 and 2. Chapter 10, Space. The inside of the spaceship was really nice, and I saw some fruit in a bowl nearby and flew over to it and began munching. Tab saw what I was doing and cheerfully followed me over to the fruit bowl and began munching away too. Very good, Wolfie said happily as he walked over to the steering controls. Enjoy all of the food that you want, and now I'm going to set a course for original. Between bites of fruit, I asked, how long will it take for us to get there? And Wolfie said, this isn't the fastest spaceship in existence, so it'll take about a day, but that's good, because it'll give us some time to record videos of you two telling about what's happened to you. Who knows, maybe we can even rally enough sympathy for your planet's cause that a war can be avoided because the vampires on Earth will be so outmatched. Sounds good, Tab said, and after he and I had eaten for a while, we flew over to Wolfie and said that we were ready to tell the camera what had happened to us. Nice, Wolfie said, and then he got a video camera out, pointed it at us, and said, whenever you're ready, go ahead and go. And so Tab and I went on and on about how bad the vampires were for us and for Earth for a while, and then we said that we had probably said about all that we could think of, and so Wolfie turned the camera off and said, that was great, y'all. This video should be pretty much all that we need in order to gain enough new forces that we'll be able to save your planet. Woohoo, I said, and then Wolfie said, while we travel, you two feel free to explore the spaceship and do whatever you want. We've got books, movies, games, food, drinks, and pretty much everything you could want on here. And Tab and I gratefully thanked him and began exploring the ship. We soon entered the library, and I found a book called The Dreaded Donut Dropper Strikes Again, and began reading it. That looks interesting, Tab said, and I chuckled and said, I can read it out loud to you if you want, and Tab said, nice, and so I began reading the book. Once upon a time, the dreaded donut dropper was out and about and suddenly had an idea. See, he remembered that a Tyrannosaurus Rex named Rexy had gobbled him up a while back, and that meant that Rexy was a miscreant, and we all know what the dreaded donut dropper does with miscreants, mwahahahaha. And so he transported over to Rexy and began hurling donut after donut after donut after donut after donut at her until she was so covered in donuts that she couldn't move anymore. Then he transported her back to his rehabilitation center, and Tila and Edge greeted him and the angry Tyrannosaurus Rex by saying, wow, boss, this has got to be the most impressive miscreant we've had arrive at this rehabilitation center yet. Mwahahahahahaha, the dreaded donut dropper said happily. Rexy here definitely needs some rehabilitation, that's for sure. And then he went over to where Bear was being held captive and said, Jelly's been taking too long to declare that you're rehabilitated, and so I'm doing it now. You're a professor again, Bear, and no more gobbling up the miscreants. Woo-hoo, Bear said happily, and then the dreaded donut dropper smirked and said, I've already got a brand new miscreant for you to help me rehabilitate, and so your teaching can begin, my rehabilitated friend. Bear then happily followed the dreaded donut dropper over to where Tila and Edge and Rexy were, and he gulped when he saw Rexy and said, "Are you sure that this is a good idea, boss? I mean, this dinosaur could destroy our entire rehabilitation center in like 2 seconds if those donuts were to be removed from her." "Wrong," the dreaded donut dropper said with a smirk, and then he led Bear to a huge room and said, "Just a minute, Bear. I'll be right back with Rexy." Bear trembled with fear at the thought of being alone in a room with Rexy, and was worried that Rexy might gobble him up and send him to hell again. The last time he'd been to hell, he'd been lucky that Satan still hadn't managed to return to hell yet, but he was worried that by now Satan had managed to return, and he did not want to have to face Satan again. Then the dreaded donut dropper transported Rexy into the huge room with Bear, and he had removed the donuts from her. "Gotta go," the dreaded donut dropper said mischievously, "and good luck helping Rexy get onto the road to rehabilitation." Then the dreaded donut dropper quickly transported out of the room, and Bear shrieked in terror as Rexy began chasing him around the room. Rexy, of course, quickly caught Bear and gobbled him up, and so he fell into her stomach and began pleading with her to let him out. Rexy had no intention of doing as Bear was requesting, though, and immediately began bashing into the walls of the huge room as hard as she could. The walls quickly collapsed, and she then went on a rampage of destruction and gobbling throughout the entire rehabilitation center. Officer Keyes saw what was happening and also heard Bear's pleas for help, and so they quickly transported Rexy back to her eggs and then transported into her stomach to retrieve Professor Bear. The dreaded donut dropper and Tila and Etch told me that you'd been reinstated and that you were helping rehabilitate a new miscreant, Keyes said, and I should have known by the smirks on their faces that they had pulled some sort of stunt like this, and this also makes it obvious why they were in such a hurry to leave the center to go find more miscreants. They must have really wanted to make this reinstatement difficult for you, Bear. And Bear fearfully said, "Can we please do less talking and more of you transporting me out of here, Officer Keyes? I can already feel the digestive fluids trying to kill me." "Oh, I suppose you're right," Keyes said reluctantly, "but first let's get our story straight. I say that we tell the dreaded donut dropper the truth, which is that Rexy was successfully rehabilitated and returned home, and then some random monster from outer space began smashing through the rehabilitation center and then fled the scene before we could capture them. That's how you remember it happening too, correct?" "So I don't even get to chew them out for this madness?" Bear protested, but then he saw an evil gleam in Key's eyes and said, "Fine, of course, that's the full and honest truth about what happened. Now, please get me out of here before these digestive fluids damage me anymore." "Oh, I suppose I should do that," Keyes said, and then they transported away from Rexy's stomach without bringing Bear with them. "No," Bear wailed. "Come back, Keyes, come back." But seconds turned into minutes, and Keyes still hadn't returned, and Bear screamed in agony as the digestive fluids burned him all over and were about to destroy his body and send him to hell. But at the very last moment before Bear would have died, Keyes returned and transported Bear back to the rehabilitation center. "Oh, Bear," Keys wailed, "it's so horrific that that monster from outer space wounded you so badly during their attack on this sacred rehabilitation center. We won't let that miscreant escape justice forever, and we're going to bring them here to be rehabilitated." Bear was about to point out that Keys was lying again, but then he saw the malicious gleam in Key's eyes and sighed and said, "Oh yes, it was terrible. That monster from outer space is one of the worst miscreants of them all." And Keys grinned in satisfaction and said, "That they are, my friend, that they are." And Bear secretly swore to get revenge against Keys at some point if he could, but he was still glad that Keys had pulled him out of Rexy's stomach before he died, because hell might have been even worse than having to recover from all of the excruciatingly painful wounds that Rexy's digestive fluids had caused. The end. "Thanks for reading that to me," Tab said happily, and then he flapped his wings and flew over to another book that had caught his eye. I looked at the book that had caught his interest, and it was called Living Nails for the Win. Tab noticed that I had been looking at the book, and so he grinned and said, "Want me to read this one to you?" And I said, "Sounds good," and Tab began reading the book to me. Once upon a time, Ellen was out and about and enjoying a bright and sunny day. Then suddenly she saw someone begin insulting another person, and she wondered if this situation might end up requiring the use of her living nails. "You were the worst delivery guy ever. I remember when it took you 2 hours to get my pizza to me. What do you have to say for yourself?" the man who was hurling insults said. "Dude," the other man replied, "I don't even deliver pizzas anymore, so why don't you buzz off?" "But you lied to me," the other man said angrily. "You told me that the pizza place had just not gotten the order to you until 20 minutes before you delivered it, but then I called them and they said that it had been given to you well over an hour before you delivered it. Why the lie, man? If you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call the police and get a restraining order against you," the man said. "We don't have any business with each other, and it's time for this conversation to end." "Nope," the other man said diabolically, and then Ellen saw him pull out a taser, and she and the living nails immediately sprang into action. The living nails sliced off the hand that was holding the taser, and the man said, "Ah, what the? Oh no, it's that crazy Ellen. Ah, someone call an ambulance." "Thanks for saving me, Ellen," the other guy said gratefully, "and I'm a big fan of yours too." "Just doing the right thing," Ellen said happily, and she gave him a friendly nod and then dashed away to find more villains to defeat. It wasn't long before she was passing an alleyway and saw that there were 2 more people than who were quarreling in there. "No," one of them said in a quiet voice, "we can't tell her about our affair, because then she'd divorce me." And the other one said, "She's supposed to divorce you so that you can marry me." And at that point, Ellen had heard enough, and her living nails sprang into action. "Affairs won't get you farther in life," she said as she stepped into the alleyway, "and so either you two confess to this man's wife about your affair, or the living nails are going to get very upset with you." "Oh no," the man wailed, "it's Ellen." And the woman said, Oh, hi, Ellen. I agree. Time for us to come clean. Time to come clean and apologize, Ellen said threateningly, and the woman gulped and said, Of course, we must apologize too, I guess. And promise not to continue your affair, Ellen added, and the woman suddenly began crying and said, But he's my true love. Don't take him away from me. Cheating isn't true love, Ellen said dismissively, and then the man said, And assault isn't heroism either, is it? Huh, Ellen said guiltily. I suppose that you might have a point there. How about you call up your wife so that you two can apologize for the affair, and then I'll find some of the people who I've assaulted and apologize to them. And you'll promise not to assault anybody else too, the woman said with an angry glare. And Helen said, Fine, I'll promise not to assault anybody else, though self-defense and defense of others isn't assault, and so I'm still allowed to do that. Okay, the man said as he pushed some buttons on his phone. I'm calling my wife now. And Ellen said, Put it on speakerphone so that I can hear. And the man pushed a button that made the phone go into speakerphone mode. Then he and the woman he'd been having an affair with both talked to his wife, and they admitted to having the affair and said that they were sorry, and they promised not to continue the affair. The wife was, of course, furious, but she stopped short of promising to divorce the man, which seemed to make the woman, who the man had been having an affair with, pretty unhappy. After the call was over, the man said, Well, I guess this is farewell to both of you. Hopefully I'll never see either of you again, and I'm not looking forward to getting home to my wife tonight. Gulp. And the three of them parted ways, and LN sped off to go apologize to all of the people she'd assaulted, and she gulped a bit nervously because she knew that that list of people was pretty frickin' long. Another masterpiece, I said happily. Thanks for reading it to me, Tab. And Tab grinned and happily, and the two of us began searching through the library for more books that might catch our interest. Chapter 11. Maintenance. Tab and I continued reading for a while, and then we got tired and fell asleep next to each other on the couch. When we woke up, I noticed that we were now snuggled up to each other, and I quickly moved away from Tab so that things wouldn't get too awkward. I mean, I kinda liked him, but we weren't really a romantic couple yet, and I wasn't sure if our friendship would even end up going in a romantic direction. As I stretched comfortably on the couch, I suddenly heard Wolfie's voice say, We're here, and Tab woke up at the sound of his voice, and I said, Sounds like we're on Original now, and Tab said, Nice, are we turning back into humans or not? I don't know, I said uncertainly. Probably, though. I'll decide when we get to the pool of OG. Then both of us flew over to Wolfie, and Wolfie used the ship's controls to transport the three of us down next to the pool of OG. But then I saw that there was a chain blocking the entrance to the pool, and there was a sign on the pool that said, The pool of OG is undergoing maintenance right now, and it should be operational again in about a year. Well, I suppose that for now this sign has decided for us, I said, but I guess a year isn't that long to wait, Wolfie said. Back to the ship then? And Tab and I nodded, and so Wolfie pressed a button that caused the beam of light from the ship to shine on us and transport us back into the ship. Well, Wolfie said, I guess it's up to you two what you want to do now. I mean, I can take you to, like, pretty much anywhere on any planet that you want. And so the universe is your burrito right now. And then he grabbed a magazine that was called Explore the Universe, and he handed it to us. Thanks, Tab said, and he and I quickly began poring through the magazine and reading about all of the different planets that we could visit if we wanted to. After a while, Tab and I both agreed that the planet of Fruitsea seemed like the best planet to visit, and so we told Wolfie that we wanted to travel to Fruitsea, and Wolfie said, love it. I think it'll take only a couple of hours to get there from here, and he began using the steering controls to steer us towards the planet of Fruitsea. Then, as he steered the ship, Wolfie said, by the way, is it alright if I send the video of you two out now? I wanted to double check with you first because I rewatched it a few times, and that thing is definitely going to make waves. In a good way, of course. The type of waves that'll hopefully improve the bad situation that your planet is currently in. And Tab and I both shrugged and said that it was fine with us for the video to be shared, and Wolfie said, awesome, you two are about to become a couple of very famous bats. Chapter 13. Newcomers. Then Wolfie used a computer to upload the videos to the intergalactic net and said, boom, these videos are gonna go so viral. And I was a bit nervous about how it seemed like so many people were gonna see me talking, but I suppose that it was for a good cause and I shouldn't worry about it. I never really wanted to be famous, Tab mused, but if this can defeat that stupid council of vampires on Earth and those who follow them, then I'm actually pretty excited about this. And then he added, and I'm also kinda hungry again, and he flew over to a nearby fruit bowl. Me too, I said cheerfully, and I followed him over, and we both began consuming some yummy fruit. The trip to Fruitsea was pretty uneventful, and once we got there, Wolfie gave us a couple of remotes and said, if you ever want me to come and visit you for some reason, then just press the buttons on one of these remotes in this order. And he showed us what order to press the buttons in, and it was just a simple outside square pattern, and so it was very easy to remember. Also, he said, I'll be back in about a year, regardless of whether you contact me, to see if you want to go back to the pool of OG. And so, even if you somehow lose the remotes, you'll be cool. This planet is full of only vegetarians, and it's fiercely protected by the intergalactic community, and so you two should be very safe here. That's all of the information that you really need. Shall I have the ship transport you outside now? Very good, I said, and thanks for all of your help. And Tab said, yeah, I bet that planet is going to be a blast. Very good, Wolfie said happily, and he quickly used the ship's controls to transport Tab and I outside of the ship and onto the surface of the planet of Fruitsea. Tab and I were only on the planet's surface for a few seconds before we saw Wolfie's ship speed away, and so now Fruitsea was our new home for a while. I looked around, and the planet definitely lived up to its name. There were fruit trees everywhere of all shapes, kinds and sizes, and of course, there were lots of other kinds of plants around too. As we were looking around, I heard a voice say, "Hello, newcomers, and welcome to Fruitsy," and I turned around and saw that the voice had come from a panda bear. "Thanks," I said happily. "I'm Ravana, and this is Tab, and we're planning on probably staying here for at least a year." "Very good," the panda said cheerfully. "We welcome all creatures onto this planet as long as they aren't carnivores, and so we're very happy to have you here with us, and I'm Penny, by the way." "It's very nice to meet you, Penny, and that sounds great to us," Tab said, and then Penny said, "Would you two like for me to show you to a place where you can stay if you like? We have lots of excellent lodging areas on Fruitsy." And I said, "That'd be great," and Penny beamed happily and said, "Cool beans, follow me, and I shall show you to a place that I think you two will really enjoy living at." Chapter 14. News. Well, as you've probably already guessed, Tab and I had a truly delightful year on Fruitsy, and it truly was like we had landed on a paradise planet. Then, when Wolfie returned after a year to offer to take us to the Pool of OG, Tab and I both thanked him but said that we decided to just remain on the planet of Fruitsy as pets. Wolf seemed to approve of our decision and told us that the intergalactic community had managed to get the rogue council of vampires that was on Earth to pack their stuff up and leave, and so Earth was now not full of vampires anymore, which meant that Earth was now a much safer place than it had been while that council of vampires and those who had followed them had been there. Tab and I were overjoyed at the good news, and we thanked Wolfie for letting us know about it. And Wolfie grinned, said farewell, and flew away from the planet of Fruitsy. And so that's the story, folks. That's how Tab and I went through some pretty terrible things, but eventually ended up traveling to a wonderful planet where we're confident that we'll live happily ever after. The end.